Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf Pesachim Mem Aleph. We're 9 lines from the top of the Amud. The Mishnah told us that one may not eat a korban Pesach unless it was properly roasted. But otherwise, if it was cooked, whether in water or other juices, mashkin, or peris, there's a lav. One may not eat that korban Pesach. Says the Gemara 9 lines from the top, Ein mavashlim v'chulu. Now what happens to other juices other than water? How do we know that that also would be us? Tana Rabbanan. B'mayim, since the pasuk only mentions water, so the pasuk says, Al toichlu mimenu na. We may not eat a korban Pesach which was not fully roasted, nor as a partially roasted korban Pesach, ubashel mevushel b'mayim, or a korban Pesach which was cooked in water. So that's not meant to be eaten. What yet? Says the pasuk, ki'im tzli eish, rather a korban Pesach which was roasted, tzli eish, al krov v'al kirbay. V'reishay al krov v'al kirbay. So since the pasuk begins by describing the isser, don't eat na, partially roasted, or if it was cooked, but cooked in what? Ubashal mushal b'mayim, that implies that only water poses a concern. Tana Rabbanan, b'mayim, only water. Ainli ala b'mayim. We only find an isser if it was cooked in water. Shar mashkim menayin. How do we know that even the korban Pesach cooked using other liquids, other juices, would also be problematic? Amris kal v'chayma. We can apply and learn from a kal v'chayma. Uma mayim she'ein mefigin taman asurin. Since we find that even water, although it doesn't really change the flavor, it doesn't affect the taste because it doesn't have its own flavor. It's tasteless. So even that is asur. The Torah says something cooked in water is asur. Shar mashkin, certainly other forms of juice, other liquids which have their own flavor, and they distort, they affect the actual flavor, natural flavor of the meat. Shar mashkin shemefigin taman, which have an effect on the taste of the meat. Lakoshkin, certainly, of course, there's an issa to eat that korban Pesach. So according to the Tanakama, the Rabbanan here, B'mayim is the pasuk, Shar mashkin from a kal v'chayma. Taisa as a kasha, we know that ein mazhir min adin, one may not derive an ashara, an oynesh from a kal v'chayma. This is learned in the Gemara Makkos. So how can we learn the lav and the malchus pertaining to other mashkin from a kal v'chomer based on mayim? Says Taisus, we're not trying to introduce a new concept. We're not trying to be mechadish, something new. Rather, just to be megala, to reveal, to demonstrate the true intention of bishul. That when the Torah says bishul, it's not specifically regarding water, but pertaining to any types of bishul, any type of cooking, involving any type of juice as well. So this is Tanakama, B'mayim is the pasuk, other mashkim learn from a kal v'chayma. Rebbe Omer, I have a different mocker for this halach. B'mayim, the pasuk says B'mayim, which indicates Ein li ela mayim. Perhaps from here we only learn water. Shar mashkim menayim. What about other mashkim? Talmud Lema ubashel mevushel mikol mocker. Why does the Torah say bashel mevushel rather than just say atochlu menu na umevushel? Bashel mevushel is a riboy. To be marba and include other types of mashkin as well. My benayu. What is the difference halachically between the Rabbanan who learn from a kal v'chomer and Rebbe who learns from the extra word bashel mavushel? Ikar benayu. The difference would be tzli keder. If it was roasted in a pot, so keder is kedera, meaning that you didn't put any other liquids in there. You took the piece of meat, put it in a pot, and it got cooked in its own juice. So this will be the nafkamina. According to Rebbe, this is also considered a form of bishul because it's cooking in juice and liquid. Whereas according to the Chachamim, there's no concern because this liquid, this juice emanating from the piece of meat won't affect its flavor. It's the same variety as the meat itself. It won't change, it won't distort the taste of the meat, and therefore it's not included in the Kal V'chomer. The reason why other mashkim are asr because of the Kal V'chomer. Since water which doesn't have an effect is asr, certainly other juices which will change the flavor are asr. But this type of juice, this type of natural liquid emanating from the meat, won't change the flavor. And therefore, according to Chachamim, tzli keder would be mut. Perhaps let's take a look at Rashi inside here. So we back up about 8 lines from where we're holding now in the Gemara. So the Rashi begins the line with Bamayim. Uvashel mavushel bamayim. Perhaps only water would be a problem, but other juices not. Says the Tanakama, we learn it from a Kal V'chomer, that since water, although it doesn't have a real effect on the flavor of the meat, it's still asr. It's asr to cook in water. Certainly other juices, shemifigen taman, says Rashi, shenoisten by tam shlehem, which insert their own flavor into the meat. Of course, it will be worse off, and one cannot do that. That's the Tanakama. And Rabbi says we have a drasha, ubashal mavushal, rubuyahu. It's an extra word. The havel mechtav, no mavushal. The pasuk should have said al teichlu mimenu no umavushal. Bashal, mavushal is a double lashon to include other types of liquids. The Gemara said that afkamin is tzli keder. Shemavashal oisei b'kedera b'loy mayim. It's cooked in a kedera, tzli keder, in a kedera, without adding water, without adding any other mashka. Elamayim haneflatim mishamnoi, or ela b'mayim haneflatim mishamnoi. It's cooked in its own juice, in its own shuman, its own fat. So that's enough kamina. Leman the yolaf lam Kal V'chomer, according to the Chachamim, who derive other mashkim by way of a Kal V'chomer, hachashari, in this case it's mutter, because there's no effect, there's no change to the flavor. L'Rebbe Diolaf Miribuya, however, according to Rebbe, he learns from a Ribuy. Hi Nami Bashal Mavushal. This is also included in Bashal Mavushal because it's a form of Vishal. Says the word Rabbanan, Hi Bashal Mavushal May Avdilahu. Chacham who learned other mashkim from a Kal V'chomer, what do they do with the double lashon of Bashal Mavushal? They apply it to the following halacha contained in the following brisa. Bishloi v'achakach tzolei. Let's say you first cooked the Korban Pesach and then followed the cooking by roasting it. Oi, in the reverse, shetzalei v'achkach bishlei. First he roasted it and then he cooked it. Chayiv, he's chayiv malchus upon eating this Korban Pesach. Says, well, let's analyze. Bishlei v'achkach tzolei. If he first cooked it and then roasted it, chayiv, of course he's chayiv the bashlei because he cooked it. This thing was already cooked prior to being roasted. So it has a din of a mavushal, and there's malchus upon eating it. It doesn't lose its mavushal status just because he followed it with some roasting, which doesn't really change its status. It's already a mavushal. So that we understand. Ella, but in the other case, we have some difficulty. Tzolei, v'achakach bishlei, he first roasted it, so it's been roasted, and then he decided to add some cooking to it. Why is he chayiv? Hatzli eshu is considered roasted. Why would it lose its status of tzolei? Once tzolei, always tzolei. Amai. So why would it be chayiv? Apparently this brisa is following Shittas Rabbi Yosi, who holds that even if you follow one process with another, the second most recent process adds some new element to the item, and in this case, even though he initially roasted it properly, but once he followed it with a cooking process, that adds. It becomes in addition to being a roasted item, it's also a cooked item. As we're going to see in the following brisa, we took something which was baked and then cooked it, it's considered cooked, according to Rabbi Yosi. This anya yoitzin berikik hashari. One could be yoitzin mitzvahs matzah by eating a rikik, a matzah which was soaked, ubemavushal shaloni moyach, or with something which was cooked after it was baked. It was followed by a cooking process, as long as it was loini moyach. It wasn't didn't disintegrate, didn't dissolve, it still retains its form. Divrei Rabbi Meir. So according to Rabbi Meir, since this matzah was cooked, of course, it was baked, of course, so the fact that he followed it with a cooking process doesn't detract, it's not mevatel the afia status, the fact that it was baked, it still remains a baked item. Rabbi Yossi Omer, no. Yotzim b'rekik hashar. You can be yotzim with a soaked matzah, but not if it was cooked. Even if it didn't disintegrate, it didn't dissolve, it still retained its shape, its form. It still looks like a matzah. Even though it was initially baked, once you followed it with cooking, the bishul is mevatel the afiyah. It's no longer regarded as something baked and can be used for matzah. Likewise, when it comes to the carbon pesach, which is meant to be roasted, according to Rabbi Yossi, even if something was already roasted, but if it's followed with a bishul, that bishul is mevatel the roasted aspect of it. Ula Amar afilu tei Rav Meir. You know what? This halach can be in line with Rav Meir as well. Although when it comes to matzah, he says once it's baked, you can't go ahead and turn it into something cooked. It can't be mevatel the baked aspect of it. But when it comes to Pesach, it's different. Shani Hacha, here it's different, Amakra, because we have a pasuk, a bashal mavushal, which is coming to add even this case. It's a ribui, that even something which had already been roasted, if you follow the tzliya with bishul, it does add a cooked element to the meat, and is considered mavushal, and that's because the Torah is being marbi, even this type of bishul, even if it's just a weak type of bishul, bashal mavushal is coming to add this case as well. So let's summarize. We have a Pesach which is cooked in water. All agree is aser. In other mashkin, all agree as well. It is aser and involves a chiyuv of malchus. According to the Rabbanan, because of the Kal V'chomer, according to Rebbe, bashal mavushal is coming to add other mashkim as well. Mora says nafkamina between the two shittas is tzli kedar. So if you hadn't added any liquid or juice, it was just cooked in its own juice. According to the Rabbanan, it's okay because the taste has not been affected. According to Rebbe, this is also included in bashal mavushal. And regarding something which was roasted and then cooked, so according to one version, Rabbi Yossi will be the one that says it's considered cooked. According to Ula, even Rameh would agree, because the pasuk is marbe even this type of bishul. Tana Rabban. Yachol tzolai kol tzarcha yechayv. Perhaps if a person over barbecues, over roasts his carbon pesach, he would be chayiv on eating it, because the pasuk says it has to be tzliesh, properly roasted, but not, Rashi says, not kliesh, not burnt in a fire. So perhaps there would be a chiv of malchus. Talmud loyma al toichlu memenu no, ubashal mavushal b'mayim. The Torah is telling you can't eat it if it's no, if it's not properly roasted, not fully roasted, or if it's cooked. No, ubashal mavushal amarti lecha. I only instructed you regarding no or cooked. V'lo yishet tzoled kol tzarchai, but not in the case where it was over roasted. That would not involve an isser. Hechi dami, what's the example of this over roasting? Amar Vashi, the shabia charoicha. That he went ahead and scorched it, burnt it. Even so, there's no lav. As in Farshim speak out, we're speaking obviously that it's still edible, and therefore he can be yotzei the mitzvah of achilas pesach. Tana Rabbanan, yochel ochal kazais chai hechayiv. Perhaps even if a person eats raw carbon pesach, is chayiv malchus, because it's not properly roasted. Is that so? Talmud loymar no. Al toichlu memenu no ubashal mavushal. Once again, let's look at the wording of the pasuk. Don't eat cooked, don't eat partially roasted. No. Ubashal amarti lecha. I only instructed you regarding partially roasted or cooked. Only there do we have a chiyuv of malchus. V'lo chay, but not if it's raw. If it's raw, there's no malchus. If that's the case, perhaps lichatchila you can eat carbon pesach even raw. Talmud loymar kiyim tzliesh. That same pasuk concludes by saying, well, don't eat it no or mavushal, but do eat it tzliesh. So there's a mitzvah say to eat the carbon pesach properly roasted. Let's take a look at Rashi. Right off to the right. Chai, says Rashi, legamri, completely raw, shloi nitzla klal, not at all roasted. Perhaps there's a chiv there. No, tzli and tzali. No is partially roasted. So only something like that, or cooked, entails a chiv, a malchus, but not something raw. If that's the case, says Rashi, yochel yeh mutter. Perhaps it would be mutter lechatchila, le'echem imenu chai lechatchila. Dafilu yisur nami leka. Ta'am lema. That's what the pasuk says. Al toichelu menu no. And then continues, ki im tzli. We imply, v'loi zeh she'en etzali. The only way is tzli, but not something which is not tzli. Now, why is there no lav? Why is there no malchus? Says Rashi, v'havi lav shebeklolis. Because this lav is not your typical lav. A specific lav telling you, you can't do this, you can't do that. For instance, eating it partially roasted or cooked. The Torah is specifically telling you, don't do that. It's a specific lav for this ma'aseh, for this act. And that results in curse. But when we have a lav, which is a general, unspecified lav, like over here, Torah is telling you the only way to eat it is tzli, but no other way. So that's including anything other than tzli, whether raw, partially roasted, cooked. So it's a general, unspecified lav, and therefore a lav shebeklolis does not result in malchus. V'haytana savar, this Tana over here that says there's no malchus upon eating the raw Korban Pesach, he holds ein loikin alav shebeklolis. There's no malchus on a general lav. So in Isser, yeah, because the Torah is telling you eat it specifically tzli, but malchus, no. Continues the Gemara. Heichi damina. What exactly is this no? Amarav k'de amri parsoy, as the Persians say, avar naim. Avar naim, Rashi says, is a certain type of partial roasting, partial barbecuing. Continues the Gemara. Amrav Chizda. Hamavashel b'chamitveri b'Shabbos pat. If one should cook on Shabbos using chamitveri, the natural hot springs of Sferia, which were remnants of the Mabul, Chazal say Hashem left some over so that the people in this world can enjoy, can have te'elis, benefit from it, has a therapeutic value to it. So a person should use that type of material, which is not, it's not the heat of fire, it's natural heat coming from the natural spring water. If he cooks using that, he's potter. That's not considered a proper bishul, which needs to utilize heat of fire specifically. So that's when it comes to Shabbos. However, Pesach, shebishlei b'chamitveria chayiv. A Korban Pesach, which was cooked using these chamitveria. Of course, the Mepharshim speak out. We're not speaking specifically about chamitveria because you can't take the Korban Pesach out of Yerushalayim. This is an example. Should he cook his Korban Pesach using naturally hot spring water, and eats that Korban Pesach is chayiv? By the way, when we speak about chayiv in the whole sugya, we're not referring to the actual cooking process. The chayiv is only if the person eats this type of Korban Pesach. Torah says don't eat a Korban Pesach which was cooked. So if a person eats a Korban Pesach cooked using chamitveria, is chayiv. Says, well, why this difference? Ma'ishna b'Shabbos deloi. Why is it that on Shabbos there's no chayiv? By cooking something with chamitveria, they told us eish b'ina v'leka, because by Shabbos we need to have a derivative of fire. It needs to be told us the eish, heat coming from an eish. In this case, there is no eish, therefore he's potter. If so, Pesach nami lav told us eishu. When it comes to Korban Pesach, it's not either told us eish. So why is this considered something cooked? If it's not bishul for Shabbos, then it's not bishul for Pesach. Omar Rava, my chayev the Tana. You're right. What does the word chayev mean? When Chizah says Pesach shebishle b'chamitveria chayev, you know what he meant when he said chayev? Not on account of the lav of don't cook. It's not considered cooked. Rather, the ka'ava mishum tzli'esh. He was over on the lav of tzli'esh, this general lav. He meant to eat it roasted, but not in any other way, including something which was cooked through chametz. So true, it's not a mavushal. So that specific lav, which says don't cook, don't eat something cooked, certainly doesn't apply here. But the other general lav, eat it roasted only, and in no other way, includes this as well, because it's not roasted, it's not sliyesh. As Rashi points out, apparently, he's working with a shita that there is malchus for a general lav, for a lav shabaklolis. Concludes the Gemara. Rav Chia Ber Rav Nosson, he had a girsa, masni lo Rav Chizda behedya. He presented Rav Chizda's statement clearly indicating that the chiyuv is based on tzliyesh, on that general lav. On Rav Chizda, hamavashal b'chamet tveria b'Shabbos pater. However, uPesach shebishla b'chamet tveria chayiv. Why? And Rav Chizda himself concluded she'avar mishum, which lav? Mishum tzliyesh. Let's see Rashi. About 8 lines from the bottom. So Rav Chizda tells us chamet tveria, if he cooked on Shabbos using the mayones reischen, these natural hot springs, he's pater. Pesach shebishna b'chamet tveria chayiv al achilos. Right, we're speaking about the chiv on the achila. And at this point, the Gemara figures kasakadaitich mishum deloy seichel mavushal. The chiv is on account of the lav, which says you're not meant to eat something cooked. So Gemara asked, well, if on Shabbos we say he's not chayiv, the lav told us eishi hilkach lav bishalu, the lav chayiv b'shmav malacha. So why, when it comes to Pesach, do you consider it bishul? The Gemara responded by saying, you're right. There's no issur of bishul. The issur is because it's not properly roasted. So by default, there's a lav. Mishum tzliyesh. Lav, the loy seichal. Ki ain't tzliyesh. Ikka. That lav there is. V'loy lav the bishul. V'savar, Rav Chizda apparently holds, loikin alav shebeklolis. And the Gemara concluded, indeed, Rav Chizda said behedya, clearly, the chayiv Rav Chizda mishum tzliyesh, v'lav mishum bishul. So we see from this Gemara that this pasuk of al toichlu menu no, v'asham v'shal b'mayim, begins with a specific lav, don't eat no, don't eat cooked, but then concludes with a general lav, kiyim tzliyesh, rather, eat it roasted, only roasted, but anything other than roasted would be asr, but that's called a lav shebeklolis, because it's all inclusive. Anything other than properly roasted is included in that lav. So according to one opinion, there's malchus even on lav shebeklolis, and according to the other opinion, there is not. They won't pick up on this topic and apply it to different cases. Amar Rav, achloy no. If a person ate the korban Pesach, no, partially roasted, like Eshtayim, he gets 2 malchus. Why? One is the specific lav because it was roasted. It was not partially roasted. And then we have the general lav, the kiyum tzliyesh lav, that there's a lav for anything other than roasted properly. So according to Rava, there's a malchus on lav shebeklolis. Continues the Gemara, mevushal, if you eat something cooked, like Yishtaim, here as well, there are 2 malchus. One on account of a specific lav, al toichel mevushal, and then the general lav, because it's not properly roasted. No umevushal, if you should eat the korban Pesach, no and mevushal, like Yisholish, he gets 3 malchus. One on account of the specific isser of no, the other one because of mevushal, and the other one because of the general lav, because it's not properly roasted. So according to Rava, there's a malchus on a lav shebeklolis. Abai disagrees. Abai Omar ain't loikin a lav shebeklolis. Therefore he holds, we will not apply the general lav to give him malchus. Let's take a look at Rashi. On top, loikish time, this is Rava speaking, you get 2 malchus. Mishum loy seichal na, that's number 1. And number 2, mishum loy seichal ki im tzliyesh. The chi im tzliyesh nami alav loy seichal koi. Says Rashi, where does tzliyesh have a lav? Because the words ki im tzliyesh refers back, connects back to the beginning of the pasuk al toichlu menu. So al toichlu only if it's tzliyesh. So we learn from here that the general lav, a general malchus, for anything other than properly roasted. So that's Rav Shita. No entails 2 malchus, and mavushal as well, says Rashi, like Ishtai. Mishum mavushal, number 1, because it was cooked. So we have a specific lav on that. And in addition, umishum loy seichlu kim tzliyesh, which is a general lav. Abai disagrees. He says, this lav, this general lav, is lav shebechlolisu, the koil boy kol minei beshulim she'enot tzli leser, because this lav is not a specific lav for a specific ma'aser. It's coming to include anything that's not properly produced, whether it's partially roasted, whether it's cooked with water, other juices, even something which is raw, even something which is chametz veri. So we have all different types of things included in this lav. Anything other than properly roasted. So it's a lav shebeklolis, and there's no malchus. Continues the Gemara. Ikadam, some presented Abaye's shita as follows. Tarati hu delilaki. Abaye meant to say that if a person eats something cooked, let's say, you don't apply twice malchus. You don't get the general and the specific. Chadam is lucky. But one malchus he will get. Meaning, let's say, for some reason, there isn't a specific malchus here. Let's say, for example, something raw, or something cooked with chametferia. So in that case, the malchus of mavushal won't apply, because it's not properly mavushal. So since that specific lav doesn't apply, even according to Abaye, the general lav, the general malchus, will apply in this case. You can't have both together, the specific and the general. But if there's no specific, there is the general. And he will get malchus on account of the isser of kiyum sliesh, because it's not sliesh. That's one approach. Ikad the other approach was chadanami loyloki. According to Abaye, he will not even get one malchus. In this case, let's say a raw carbon pesach, even though there's no specific lav involved in eating a raw carbon pesach, you will still not get that general malchus for kiyum sliesh. Why? Because this lav is not a specific lav. It's a general lav. And it's dissimilar to the lav of chasima, which is the source of all malchus. The pasuk there speaks about the concept of malchus and relates it to the lav of a person muzzling his, like Sachsam showed Bedisha, he muzzles his animal while threshing with it. He's not allowed to do that, and the result is malchus. So that's the classic example of malchus, and we learn everything from there. Just as the malchus there, which generates the lav there, which generates malchus, is something specific. Don't muzzle your animal. We learn from there that in order to generate malchus, you need to have a specific lav, as opposed to a lav shebeklolis. Don't eat it in any other way, other than properly roasted. That's a general lav. It's not referring to a specific act. It's not like this thing is asr. It's just by default. Everything other than the proper way is asr. So it's not a specified specific thing. And therefore, according to this version of Abaye, it will not generate malchus in any situation. So according to Rava, there is malchus generated by lav shebeklolis. According to Abaye, there isn't. We have two versions: either never, or you can't get both. There's no double jeopardy. You can't have the specific lav and the general lav. But if there's no specific lav, you will get the general malchus. The Gemara will apply the same concept elsewhere. The same machlokes Abaye and Rava regarding lav shebeklolis. Rava Amar ochal zog lokish time. A nazir cannot consume any grapes, wine, or any vine materials, even branches and leaves of the vine. Now, we have specific lavin, we have a general lav. The Torah tells us that the nazir cannot have a zag, which is the skin of a grape. He can't have chartzanim, the pits of a grape. And then the Torah gives us a general lav, that anything wine related is also to the nazir. So we have a general concept, a general lav, a lav shebeklolis, and then a specific lav relating to certain specific items. So it's a similar concept to the carbon pesach. We have the same machlokes. Rav Amar, ochal zog lokish time. If a person eats a nazir ate a skin of a grape, he gets two malchus. Number one, a specific malchus relating to the zag, and in addition, the general malchus relating to anything which is wine or vine related. Chartzan, likewise, if he ate a pit, a grape pit, like Ishtaim, gets a double malchus. One on account of the pit, and one on account of general malchus, because it's a vine product. Zag v'chartzan, like a shalish. If he should eat skin of a grape and a pit, he gets three malchus. One for the zag, one for the chartzan, and one the general malchus. According to Rava, there is malchus for a lav shebeklolis. Abaye Amar, no, ain't like in the lav shebeklolis. There's no malchus on a general lav. Now, to what extent does Abaye apply this concept? Again, we have two versions. Igad Amri. Some said, Tarti Yudliloki. According to Abai, you don't get twice Malchus. So if he ate a Zag, he won't get Malchus on account of the Zag, which is a specific Isser. And then a general Malchus, that doesn't happen. But Chadam Yasloki. But one he will get, meaning, let's say, he consumed something where there's no specific lav pertaining to that. Rashi says, Olin, Lulovin, some vine branches. So there's no specific lav on that. It's included in the general Isra, general lav, of eating something which is vine related. So in that case, even according to Abai, he'll get Malchus, because he's not getting a specific Malchus. So twice you can't get. You can't get the specific and the general. But if it's something which doesn't have a specific lav, he will get Malchus because of the general lav. Ikad Amri. The other version of Abai was no. Chad Nami Lucky. You won't even get one Malchus, even in this case where there's no specific Isser, like leave of a wine. Even there, he won't get a general Malchus, because that general Isser is not a specific lav to this or to that. It includes everything that's vine or wine related, grapes, wine, leaves, branches. So it's not a specific lav, and it's dissimilar to the lav of chasima, of muzzling the animal, and therefore Malchus won't apply. So in conclusion, we learned that the pasuk of Al Teichelu Mimenu No contains two distinct elements. Firstly, specific isurim. Don't eat no, don't eat mevushal. And then a general concept. You're not meant to eat anything other than something properly roasted. That's merely a lav shebeklolis, because it includes anything by default. Let's analyze the pasuk. First, the pasuk says Al Teichelu Mimenu No ubashal mevushal b'mayim. No means partially roasted. We learned that mayim, of course, would be also. What about other mashkin? Gemara says we include that as well, according to the Chachamim, because of the Kal V'chomer, according to Rebbe, because of the double term bashal mavushal. Now, kamina between two shitas would be tzli kedar. If it was cooked within its own, and using its own liquid, its own juice, in a pot. According to the Chachamim, that would be mutter because the Kal V'chomer only includes something which interferes with the natural flavor of the meat. According to Rebbe, this too is included in bashal mavushal because it's a form of bishul. What if he first roasted it and then cooked? Gemara says that it is also considered aser. And according to one version, we follow Rabbi Yossi, and Ula says actually all would agree because ubashal mavushal is come to include even this, because despite the fact that it was originally roasted, the fact that he added bishul to it, that additional element detracts from the status, the bishul, the tzoli status, and we regard it as also being something cooked. Now, the second part of the pasuk, ki'in sliesh, which is a lav shebeklolis. You're not meant to eat it in any other manner than properly roasted. That includes everything other than properly roasted. No, mevushal b'chamei tveria, which isn't considered properly cooked. Chai, raw. So all those are included in this lav shebeklolis. So it depends. If we hold lav shebeklolis generates malchus, then he will get a malchus. In these cases as well, on account of this lav. So according to, let's say, Rava, you can get two malchus if a person eats mevushal. One on account of the specific lav, first part of the pasuk, don't eat mevushal, and then on account of the second part of the pasuk, because he is eating something in a manner other than sliesh. According to the other shita, that we're not loika lav shebeklolis, this malchus won't generate a lav. Now, what about timing? If a person eats partially roasted meat, when it's still Erev Pesach, there's a lav apply there as well. Says the Gemara Tana Rabbanan, Achal kazayis no mibaydion potter. A person should eat a kazayis of partially roasted Korban Pesach meat, mibaydion while it's still day, not yet the proper time of achilas Korban Pesach, he is potter. Kazayis no mishachasheicha chay, but if he does so after nightfall, he's chayv. Another halacha, Achal kazayis tzelim baydion. A person should eat a kazayis of the roasted Korban Pesach while it's still day, while it's still Erev Pesach. By doing so, he doesn't disqualify himself from being able to join his group later that night and continue eating the Korban Pesach. So Rashi explains, generally a person is not meant to have part of his Korban Pesach in one location, part in the other, part with one group, part with the other. But in this case, where he had his first course when it was still daytime, not yet the Zman Achila, that's not reckoned with, that's not counted. And therefore, he can go ahead and rejoin his group later. It's not considered as though he's eating his Korban Pesach in two locations with two groups. However, Kazayis Soli Mishachashecha, if he independently ate a Kazayis of roasted meat after nightfall, now he can no longer rejoin his group because he had his Korban Pesach here in this location. He can't eat it in two places. So that's a svara because this concept of not rejoining only applies when he ate his first course during the Zman Achila, but not mibaydoim. Now what about the first halacha? Why is he pater if he eats a kazayis not improperly roasted? A kazayis of that mibaydoim. Why is there no malchus there? The Gemara soon will give us the makar. Says the Brisa Tani, we have another Brisa. Yochel achal adam yochel achal kazayis no mibaydoim yechai. Perhaps even if he ate a kazayis not mibaydoim, he would have a chiv malchus. Vidinu. Says the Gemara, we can actually draw this from a Kal V'chomer to generate a Chiyuv Malchus, even if it's a Mibaydoim. Why? Uma b'sha sheyeshnai b'kum echal tzali. Since we find that even during the time when it is appropriate, there's a Chiyuv, there's a mitzvah to eat tzali, which is nighttime. Still, there's an Isser, yeshnai b'bal teichal no. There's an Isser to eat something partially roasted. So despite the fact that there's a mitzvah to eat properly, there's still going to be an Isser to eat improperly. Certainly certainly daytime, which is not an appropriate time to eat tzli. Then of course, that there would be an Isser of batoichalna. So perhaps we should apply an Isser, a malchus, for eating it raw, no, even on Erev Pesach. Or perhaps just the opposite. Let's negate this Kal V'chomer and actually come out with a conclusion that the Isser of No only applies to nighttime and not during daytime. When there's a time where you cannot eat it tzli, meaning boidyim, yeshnai b'bal toichal no. Yeah, at that point there's an Isser b'toichal no because it's not an appropriate time to eat Korban Pesach. However, perhaps when it is time to eat the Korban Pesach, nighttime, perhaps there wouldn't even be an Isser b'toichal no. So you're working with the premise that certainly there's an Isser b'toichal no, and based on that, of course, it's going to apply in boidyim, which is not really an appropriate time to eat the Korban Pesach. Perhaps just the opposite. The Issa only applies in boidyim and not Mishachashecha, because then it's a proper time. There is a mitzvah to eat the Korban Pesach. So since we have that allowance, perhaps the Bal Toichal won't apply. Bal Tisma, don't be surprised. Shari Huta Mikloli Etzatzli, don't be surprised that Mishachashecha there will be no longer an Isser, the Malchus of Bal Toichal. Now, of course, there's an Isser because it's not properly roasted, but the Malchus of Bal Toichal won't apply Mishachashecha. Don't be surprised. You know why? Because we find an exemption when it comes to tzli. Although you can't eat the Korban Pesach tzli, right? Meant to eat it at night. It says, meant to eat it at night. So if we find that there is an exemption, an exception, there's a huta mechlole when it comes to tzli, because although you can't eat it you can, so perhaps it makes things more lenient. And even if he should eat it, no, which is inappropriate, but a malchus perhaps won't apply. So perhaps let's take it in this direction, that there's no Isser no once Pesach arrives, but there is during the day. Talmud Leimar, that's why we have to take a look at the pasuk. Al toichlu mimenu no, ubashal mivashal b'mayim. The pasuk continues, ki im tzliyesh. We see the pasuk connecting the two things. You're not meant to eat it no mevushal, rather tzliyesh. She'ein Talmud Leimar ki im tzliyesh. There was no need for the pasuk to say, to describe how to eat the Korban Pesach, ki im tzliyesh. Rashi says, we have another pasuk which says, meant to eat the Korban Pesach, tzliyesh, matzis abarim rechlu. We have another pasuk for that. Now, Tosfos points out, even though we have some shittas, for instance, Rava, who learns from Ki'im Sliesh that there is malchus for anything other than roasted, lav sheba klolis. So how can the Gemara say you don't eat Sliesh? So that's the Gemara means to say that you don't need it to be placed right next to the Isser of Batoich no. The fact that the pasuk joins them together indicates that there is a dependence. There's a correlation. What does the pasuk mean with the words Ki'im Sliesh? Lo to teach you like this. At a point in time when there's a mitzvah to eat the Korban Pesach roasted, i.e. Pesach at night. At that very point there's an issa to eat it no. So two things are connected. Eat it properly and not improperly. However, during daytime, when there's no mitzvah to eat at sleep, there's no isser, there's no malchus of Batoich no. So we learn from this pasuk that the isser of Batoich no is connected to eating at sleep. That only applies Mishach HaShecha. So a person should eat the Korban Pesach no when it's still daytime. Although it's improper, he didn't eat it at the proper time, proper way, but the malchus, on account of the pasuk of Batoich no, will not apply. Rebbe's going to add another aspect. Ekra ani bashal. The Torah simply said, bashal. Matam alayim mevushal. Why the added letters mevushal? It's coming to teach you a halach. Sheyacha ainli elo shebishlei b'shech hashecha. Perhaps this isser only applies if the Korban Pesach was cooked once nighttime arrived, which is this man achilas Korban Pesach. And if he prepares it for the achila in this manner, yeah, there's a lot. Bishlei mi b'yom imnayin. What if a person decided to cook his Korban Pesach when it's still daytime? The Zman Achila has not yet arrived. It's not really considered preparing it for the Achila. Perhaps Bishul Mibayjayim won't have the same effect and won't generate the same love. Minayin, how do we know that even that type of Bishul is Asr as well? Talmud Leimer Bashul Mevushal. Mikol Makim. The double Lashon Bashul Mevushal is including even this type of Bishul. Says the Gemara, how could Rebbe apply Bashal Mevushal for this halacha? We already used it elsewhere. Back on Amar Al. The Rebbe. It says Gemara, B'hai Bashal Mevushal Afke Rebbe Litzli Keda L'Shar Mashkin. This double term Bashal Mevushal, Rebbe already applied it earlier to teach you that Korban Pesach cooked in other liquids other than water. And the Gemara concluded even if it's Tzli Keder, if it's cooked in its own juice, also generates the lav and the malchus. So this pasuk is unavailable to teach us this halach. Imkain, if it would only be for that, lemakra a bashal bashal and mevushal mevushal. We're just coming to include other juices. The Torah could have said a double lashon, but repeated the same word twice. Bashal bashal, mevushal mevushal. Why the difference in terms? My bashal mevushal. Why did the pasuk repeat it, but also change the form bashal and then mevushal? Shamas Meratarti, apparently it's coming to include another thing. This halach as well, that even if it was cooked mibaydoim, it is still considered a Pesach Mavushal and has the same liability. Okay, so we learned that if a person should eat kazais no, partially cooked, partially roasted, the Korban Pesach, mibaydoim, there's no lav there because the Isra of law is dependent on the mitzvah of eating Korban Pesach, which only applies at night. And Rebbe concluded that the Isra Mavushal applies whether it was Mavushal at night, which is the Zman Achila, and he's preparing for the Achila in that manner, or even if it was Mavushal by daytime, where it's not yet the Zman Achila, it carries the same consequences. Tana Rabban, what about if he ate a kazayis of Tzoli, mi boydoim? What happens there? Ochal tzlim boydoim, chayiv, he's chayiv. Ukazayis no, mishachashecha chayiv. And likewise, if he ate a kazayis of partially roasted, mishachashecha, once nighttime arrived, he's chayiv. So this is the Brisa. Says the Gemara, Ktani tzli dumidina. The Brisa states tzli in the same context as no, which indicates ma no belav. Just as if a person eats no, mishachashecha, what happens? It's a lav and it's malchus. Av tzli belav. Likewise, if he ate tzli mi boyjoin in an inappropriate time, there's a lav. Says the Gemara, which lav? Bishleimen no ksiv al toichlu mimeno no. When it comes to no, we have a pasuk. Don't eat no. That's a lav. Ella tzli minolan. But how do you know that there is a lav and a malchus by tzli. Tichsiv, v'achlos habasa b'layla hazeh. You meant to eat the basa of Korban Pesach, b'layla hazeh. We have a diak. B'layla in, only during nighttime. B'yoyim loy, but not during the day. Okay, so that's your makar? What do you mean? Hay lav haba miklal aseyu. This is not a direct lav. It's an implied lav. Eat it now, which implies don't eat it earlier during the day. Since it's not a direct lav, that doesn't have a din of a lav. V'chol lav haba miklal asay. A lav which is derived from an asay, such as here, it's an implied lav. It doesn't have a din of a lav. There's no chiv there. It has a din of an asay. So how can you say if a person eats tzlim by dem is chayiv? Rav Chizah Hamani, Rabbi Yudi, who follows Shittas Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that this is unique, as we're going to see. And yeah, this type of thing is considered a lav and carries a chiv. The Sanya, as we learned in the Bryce, shoyer b'seh sarua v'kolat. You have a shoyer or seh which is sarua, so whose limbs are disproportionately sized. V'kolat, or his hooves are unsplit. So it's inappropriate for a carbon, it's a mum. What can you do with it? Nedava tasa oisei. Pasuk says you can give it as a nedava, you can donate it to the Beis HaMikdash, and they would go ahead and sell it and use the funds for repairs, for maintenance. So the pasuk says oisei. Nedava tasa oisei. We learn from there. Oisei ata matvis lebedek habayis. This type of carbon which has a blemish, this bal mum, can be donated for the bedek habayis. V'i ata matvis tmimim. However, you may not hand over a behemoth which is a tamim with animal to the bedek habayis. You can be magdish a tamim to the bedek habayis. If you want to be magdish a tam, be magdish to the mizbeach, not the bedek habayis. Mikan amru, from here we learned kol matvis tmimim the bedek habayis over be'aseh. If a person is matvis a balchai who is a tamim to the bedek habayis, he's over an essay, because the Torah says you only meant to hand over Bali Mumin, not a Tamim. That's only an Asay. But how do we know that even a Lois Asay is applied here? Because the Torah here is speaking about an essay. Do it this way, but not in any other way. So even though there's an implied Isser, but it's a Lav Haba Mechal Asay, which has a din of an essay, how do we know to apply even a Lois Asay? In this case, Talmud Loimar. The pasuk begins, the parsha begins. That teaches us limed al kol parsha kula shehei belois haseh. This teaches us that anything in this parsha, the parsha that we just mentioned, discussing handing over behemoths, if something is inappropriate, not only is it an isra asay, but even a lois asay is applied. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, Amalei Rebbe l'Bal Kapara. My mashma, what do you mean? How do you see from Vaydavar Hashem Moshe Lemar that anything contained in this parsha involves a lav? Amar Loisa Bal Kapara responded, this is what Rabbi Yehuda meant. T'chsiv Lemar. Vaydavar Hashem Moshe Lemar. We take the word Lemar and we treat it like a combined word, a nutrikon. Loi nemar b'dvarim. Lemar is loi nemar b'dvarim. A loi, a loisase, was related to these words. As Tosfos explains, it doesn't mean to say that any time we have Aydav Hashem Moshe Lemar, everything following is a loisase. Because actually, as Marshal points out, the Gemara in Yuma Daf Dal tells us that why is it that we always have Aydav Hashem Moshe Lemar? What's the point of Lemar? Hashem spoke to Moshe. Why Lemar? So the Gemara learns from there that when somebody, the Gemara that the pasuk is teaching us, that if somebody gives over information, relates something to somebody which is of somewhat private nature, that recipient can't go ahead and transfer it further. He can't reveal it without asking specific permission from the original person. That's why the Torah always has to say, Vaydav Hashem Moshe Lemar, Leich Emor Lehem Yisrael. Hashem is granting specific permission to Moshe. Go ahead and relate what I've told you, what I'm going to tell you, the mitzvahs, to Klal Yisrael. So actually, Lemar elsewhere is coming to teach us something. But here specifically, where we have within this parsha a lav habo mechlal asay, right? Such as in this case where we have the pasuk telling us you can give the Balmum to bedek habayis oisay, but not something else, not something which is a tam. So we have a lav which is implied from an essay. Here, Rabbi Yehuda holds that being that the Torah begins Vaydav Hashem Shel Lemar, it's coming to teach us that it's not just a lav haba mechala. It has a status of a lav, because Lemar is loy nemar b'dvarim. A loy to say is applied to these words. That's one version. Bei Rav Amri in the base medrash of Rav, that a different interpretation. Lemar means lav emor. Tell them that there's a lav. Not only is it going to be an essay, because a lav haba mechala is generally only an essay, but it's actually a lav. It's an isser. It's a ma'aseh isser. As Rabbi Chananel explains that this second approach bei Rav, they want to go a step further. In order for it to be a true malchus, a true lav, a ma'aseh isser, it's not enough to be an implied isser. That it's something inappropriate. Don't divert from what you're supposed to do. Lav emor, make it into a lav. Say this specific act, specific ma'aseh, is a ma'aseh isser. And as a result of that, we treat it like a regular lav, and it generates malchus. So says the Gemara, apparently the Brisa, which tells us that if a person eats a kazayis of tzli, properly roasted meat, it generates chiv and malchus, is following Shittas Rabbi Yehuda. Because as Rashi explains that here as well, we have in the beginning of the Parsha, Vayomer Hashem Moshe Aaron Lemar. So Lemar is coming to add the lav, the chiv element, to the tzli b'yoyim, because although it seems that it's only an implied lav, only b'layla, not b'yoyim, so it's a lav which is coming from an essay. In fact, the Torah begins with Vayomer Hashem Moshe Aaron Lemar. That's coming to add the lav element, and we treat it like an ordinary lav, and generates malchus. Okay, let's take a quick review of the daf. We discussed the pasuk of Atoichlu Mimenu, which has two elements. It begins with specific yisurim. Don't eat no, don't eat mevushal. The Gemara says not only with water, even other mashkim as well. When it comes to tzlikeda, we have machlekes between the Rabbanan who included in the lav, whereas the Rabbanan who do not include in the lav because there's no added flavor there. According to Rebbe, bashal mevushal is going to include even this type of bishul. Regarding tzolei and afterwards bishul, the Gemara says that's also asur, whether it's Rabbi Yossi or whether all shittas. The second part of the pasuk, which says kiyim tzliyesh, which indicates that you're not meant to eat it in any other manner. So it's a general, all-encompassing lav. Anything other than roasted is inappropriate. So we have a machlekes between Rabba, who says that even a lav shabaklolis generates malchus. So according to him, if a person eats no, he'll have a double malchus. One on account of the specific isser, because atoichlu menu no applies to that, and also it's not tzliyesh. Same thing with mevushal. Same thing with something which isn't no mevushal at all. It's mevushal b'chamei tveria, but it's not tzliyesh. So you have the lav of tzliyesh. Or let's say if it's raw. According to Abaye, however, there's no malchus on lav shebachlolis. There are two versions of Abaye. Whether the point of Abaye is that you can't have a specific malchus and a general malchus, but if there's no specific malchus, there will still be a general malchus. For instance, in the case where it's raw, so there's no specific malchus for that. Perhaps there, malchus will apply because of the general malchus, or perhaps no. Even in that case, a general malchus, lav shebaklolis, cannot generate malchus. We have two versions in Abaye. What else do we learn from this second part of the pasuk of klin tzliyesh? Says the Gemara, that teaches us that if a person eats the Pesach no, but he did it min b'yidayim, he's pater, because the Torah is clearly connecting the isser of no with the positive element, with the mitzvah of kiyim tzliyesh, which teaches us that only at that very point in time when there's a mitzvah of eating tzliyesh, namely at night, is there an isser of no. But by Yom, since there's no mitzvah to eat tzliyesh, there will be no malchus, no lav of no. Finally, the Gemara says if a person eats tzliyesh by Yom, he's chayiv. The Gemara concluded, following Shittas Rabbi Yehuda, that although this is merely a lav haba mechal aseh, because v'achlos habasa, that teaches us, yeah, you meant to eat it now, during nighttime, but not during daytime. So it's a lav which is implied, it's an implied lav, which is generally not considered an aseh. But since this parsha begins with the word lemar, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that's applied even to this case of lav haba mechal aseh, and gives it a status of a true lav and a chiv malchus. Take care, much hatzlacha.